Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Department of Information Resources, What's New in the Information Technology Staff Augmentation Contract Services webinar this morning. Before we get officially started, can I do a quick audio check? If you can hear me, please raise your hand.
We're good, Colleen. You can proceed.
All right, thank you, Tracy. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. Today we are going to be talking about what's new in the Department of Information Resources ITSAC contract. Here's our agenda for what we'll cover. We're going to do some brief introductions. We'll talk about the intern program, the procurement options, and the ITSAC portal. We'll talk about the new ITSAC rates. I'm sure some of you have heard from the vendors about the new rates. We'll talk about the specialist level, the undefined title. Finally, we'll talk about the contract transition from one ITSAC contract to the next gen ITSAC contract and continuity of service. And finally, we'll have questions and answers. Next slide, please. So speaking here today is going to be primarily me, Colleen Berkeley. I am the Procurement Services Director in the Chief Procurement Office. Joining me in this ITSAC adventure is Chandra Thompson. She is a procurement lead in the Chief Procurement Office. Scott Wilson, who is also a procurement lead in the Chief Procurement Office. And Lynn Haughty, who's the Director of our Hub Program Outreach and Training in the Chief Procurement Office. Next slide. So here I am in all my glory. I just wanted to give you guys a chance to see the voice that is speaking to you today. My contact information is here, but we also do have a contact information slide at the end of this webinar. Next, please. So let's talk about interns. DIR is extremely excited to be able to present interns as an option for your ITSAC usage. Next slide, Tracy. So we have included the option for agencies and any DIR customers to request an intern for each of the ITSAC identified job titles. Most interns are likely to come from the Austin Community College internship program, which we'll talk a little bit more about on a later slide. Next slide, please. Interns are available at reduced rates. So there are actually ITSAC rates associated with each of the intern levels that DIR has identified for this contract. And they can be available for full-time placement. So you do not have to limit your intern utilization to part-time work. If you have a full-time need for someone who's at a lower level than what the starting rate would be for someone with extensive experience, interns are a wonderful option because they can come and work on your projects full-time as part of their program at the Austin Community College or the other colleges that the DIR vendors may choose to utilize for their intern staff. Next slide. So here's some of the knowledge and skills that the interns should have and be able to offer to you. They have extensive programming languages and the network administration, including cybersecurity, computer and tech support, and PC technicians. So they really are a wonderful and cost-effective option for the agencies to use. This is specific to the ACC program. This is what they look for in their students before they recommend them for an internship placement. So they have been vetted if you get an ACC intern by the community college itself, as well as by the hiring entity, which is the DIR contract holder, before they make it to your site to perform the work that's requested. Next slide. And it's important for you all to understand that interns are subject to the same rules as all other ITSAC staff. That means that when they're on your location, you can't recruit them to work for you long term, but you can hire them if they apply for any open positions at your organization. If an intern is failing to perform, you can request a replacement, and that replacement is subject to the same terms as a normal ITSAC placement, which means that you are entitled to up to 10 days of free work from the replacement if there's a need for the replacement to get up to speed on project specifics or agency processes. Intern POs can also be extended if necessary. So if it turns out that it was a wonderful placement, you really like the work, and there's continuing work along the same nature, and your PO contemplated that extension, you're welcome to extend intern POs. They do not have to be limited to a single semester. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the new procurement options and the ITSAC portal that DIR is providing. Next slide. So for use under the ITSAC contracts in this next generation, you will have two different ways that you can request resources. You can request resumes, which is the traditional ITSAC process, where you basically issue the job description, and contract holders provide you with the resumes as requested, or you can issue a statement of work, and I'll talk more about the statement of work on the next slide. So, statements of work. These are intended to assist customers with issuing blanket POs for ongoing staffing needs. You as a customer may choose to award to one or more contract holders, and those contracts should be subject to the same not to exceed rates as the request for resumes. So the rate card, the NTE rate, holds even if it is a statement of work solicitation that you choose. The PO would be issued to the contract holder just as it would be for a request for resume, but because you might be receiving multiple staff, you may want to consider tracking and reporting at the resource level. The vendors will be reporting to DIR at the individual resource level. So just consider that as you're putting together your POs. Statements of work will need to be submitted to the SOW portal for review and approval. This is just a safety check to make sure that you all are not going beyond the bounds of the ITSAC contracts, so that if an audit of your agency comes up, you can rest assured that we have validated that you are within the terms of ITSAC. And we are not intending these statements of work to be a replacement for deliverables-based information technology services or DBITS contracts. So these really are intended to give you the flexibility when you know that you're going to have ongoing variable staffing needs and you do not want to issue multiple requests for resumes and go through the interview process multiple times. This is to give you that option to issue that blanket purchase order so that any time that you need, for example, a help desk technician, you can just call up the vendor and say, please send me a help desk technician one. And that vendor has proved to you that they have the ability to meet your onboarding requirements, your SLAs, and to provide quality staff through the statement of work process. Next slide, please. So the DIR ITSAC portal, both options, the request for resume and the issuance of the statement of work, will be available on the DIR ITSAC portal. If you don't know what the DIR ITSAC portal is, it is a voluntary tool that DIR customers may use to communicate with vendors for their ITSAC requests. For your convenience, I've included the link here so that you guys can go and check in. And we do offer training, if necessary, in using the portal. Now, it's important to note that because we are going to be changing the rate under these contracts, we will have the portal closed beginning August 21st to make sure that there is not a statement of work that is issued under the old contract and then the rates change for that statement of work. So be mindful of the August 21st date, and also be aware that if you issue a solicitation, regardless of the method that you use to contract the vendors with, and you award it after 9/1, even if you issue it in the previous rate, it is the awarded date that will set the rates for the PO. All right, next slide, please. So let's talk about those new rates, the not to exceed rates. Next slide. So there has been a lot of questions from the vendor community and also from their customers regarding the not to exceed rates and how did DIR arrive at these rates. DIR performed extensive market research to come up with the appropriate base salary. We looked at Robert Half, salary.com, payscale.com. We did a third-party verification, and then we also looked at the state auditor's office salary rates for positions for state employees. Once we determined an appropriate base rate, we added a percent multiplier to adjust for the fact that the cost of living in Austin may be different than other cities. So we added an additional 10% onto those base rates. We then added an additional 60% multiplier to account for benefits, including insurance and things of that nature. And then finally, we added a 20% multiplier to account for the vendors or ITSAC contract holders' overhead, to make sure that they did have the ability to make a healthy profit under this to keep their businesses running. So all of that combined went into the rates that are presented in the ITSAC solicitation. And if any of you would like to see those rates, I am happy to provide those to you via emails for your review. It was too much to try to fit onto a slide. Next slide, please. So, as another safety net to make sure that we are ensuring that these rates are something that will ensure that you as customers do get top quality staff, we are allowing respondents to take exceptions to any of the rates within the solicitation document. As part of our evaluation process, we are going to review the exceptions, and if we see trends, we will make further adjustments as necessary. Those responses are due today at 2 o'clock, so I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like. But at the end, there will be one set not to exceed rate card that will be applicable to all of the contracts. I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that we are still working with the vendor community to make sure that we are going to be able to provide you with the quality of services that you are used to receiving. So what you need to do is make sure that you do not allow contract holders to exceed those rates for any reason. We have received questions from vendors, and we've provided them instructions during the solicitation process that those ITSAC rates are not subject to overtime or after hours increases, and there should be no extra charges for really qualified individuals. So if you're requesting a business analyst 3 with 10 years of experience and somebody proposes someone with 15 years of experience, they should still meet that not to exceed rate set for the business analyst 3 title. And I'd also like to remind you that the NPE rates are negotiable. You can negotiate them downward only, but you can negotiate those rates for both requests for resumes and for statements of work. So we are setting the upper limit with these rates. You all as agencies and customers may negotiate lower rates. It's important that you realize that in case you get qualified candidates all at that NTE rate, which may happen due to the number of new vendors that I see entering into the procurement process. Next slide, please. So because we've talked about the NTE rates and how you can't pay more for a business analyst 3 who's extra qualified, DIR does recognize that there are special circumstances where a title does not necessarily capture all of the skills required. So DIR has included in this set of contracts a specialist level. Next slide. So the specialist level is something that the customer gets to dictate. As you are filling out your solicitation documents, you can choose the level 1, 2, or 3, or you can choose to request a specialist. This does allow for the inclusion of the specialized skills into the DIR identified categories and titles. So if I wanted a business analyst 3 with 15 years of experience and also with experience working on construction projects or working with child support functions, I could choose either just to do the business analyst 3, or I might be willing to allow for an open market type competition in terms of rates and select the specialist level. The specialist level allows the contract holders to propose rates back to you. So those rates will likely exceed the NTE rate, but because you're competing that across multiple vendors, you will still get very competitive market rates. We just could not price those for you because without knowing the specialized needs that each customer may have, we couldn't work those into the job description. Okay, next slide, please. Undefined categories. The undefined category is another new item that we've included in these ITSAC contracts that will be awarded hopefully this summer. Next slide. So similar to the specialist level, the undefined category is for use for customers. It cannot be determined by a contract holder. When you all identify an IT service that is not currently listed in our titles or categories in the DIR contract. So my example here is drone operators. DIR does not have a specific job category or title for drone operators, but that is an AIS code as defined by the comptrollers. It is subject to DIR oversight, and it does fit the ITSAC contract model. The undefined category would allow you to put your request with that job title, drone operators, out on the street under the ITSAC contracts for those vendors to try to meet the needs. It does not come with set NTE rates. It will be just like the specialist where because you competed against multiple contract holders, you should get competitive market rates. But it does allow you all that flexibility that if DIR has missed something, you can still use the ITSAC contract vehicle to get those temporary staff augmentation services for you all. DIR then will do reporting on a yearly basis, if not more frequently, to see if there are trends. So if everybody starts looking for drone operators, that's something that we would work in and include into the regular contract. So it does serve two purposes. It helps you all meet the needs without having to do secondary procurement, but it also lets DIR know where there are market trends so that we can adjust our contracts to continue to meet customer needs. Next slide, please. Finally, agency's big questions about contract transition and continuity of service. Next slide. So I want to assure you all that DIR is mindful that the end of the fiscal year is coming up. We need to make sure that we have contract vehicles in place for you all for your IT staff augmentation needs. So what we are doing is extending expiring contracts of all respondents to the solicitation. If we see we have received a response from a vendor who is a current contract holder, we will make sure that there is an extension to that contract so it does not expire before the evaluation and awards are completed. Furthermore, all current ITSAC contracts have a survivability clause, which allows customer POs to live up to 2 years beyond the DIR base contract expiration. So if a vendor is either unsuccessful, an existing vendor is unsuccessful in this procurement process, or if that vendor does not respond to this procurement, you still, if you have contemplated in your original issuance of your purchase order, have the ability to extend your purchase order an additional 2 years and be under the DIR blanket terms and conditions. Finally, DIR is willing to assist customers on an individual basis for any specific resource or contract needs. So if there is a specific resource that you are concerned may be at risk because the vendor did not apply or has indicated that they're not going to be participating or is not going to be receiving an award, we are happy to assist you with working through how that process can work to get to a good solution for your agency. This also extends to those of you who may be using the Managed Application Services rate card. So that's the MOS rate card under the Shared Technology Services program. So if you have individual questions of that nature, you are welcome to reach out to us and we are happy to assist you with that. Next slide. So now we have gotten to the fun question and answer portion. I've thrown a lot of information at you. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Colleen, this is Amy. Amy Pfluger. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I thought I'd just reiterate a couple things here. The current ITSAC portal is going to have a cutoff date for new requests to be entered of 8/21. That's August 21st. One, we are doing this because we do have transition time we need to have while we move into the new portal to support the new contracts going live 9/1. It also allows for you to have enough time to submit a request, allow a minimum of 3 days for the vendors to respond with the resumes, and for you to interview and award by August 31st. One thing I do want to mention is that Colleen said, you know, we're going to extend the current contracts, starting in priority with those ones that we see they have responded. Those extensions will go to 8/31. They will not go beyond that. It is your responsibility to ensure that you have checked to make sure that the contract you are going to award is still a current and active contract, that it was extended if the expiration date was this summer, and to make sure that all of that piece is still in place. It's a good contract still when you cut your PO. So that's just some of the timing that we're looking at. I know a lot of procurement offices see last minute Christmas shopping in the last week of August for POs. So keep that in mind, and maybe inform your end users, your requesters, that we will have a cutoff date, and that they may have to wait till 9/1 to award under new contracts if we miss that date, or
Amy,
if you're that date. Yes.
Amy, this is Mary. Would you clarify, because as you know, agencies will be issuing POs that will be effective 9/1, but they will be signing them or processing them during August. Because I'm having questions pop up. How can we issue if the contract expires August 31st?
Right. So there's a couple things we need to look at with that. One is a new contract for that vendor awarded and will be live 9/1. And then if so, it will be under the new NTE rates, not the existing NTE rates. We will take back to discuss amongst our team a little more ideas around transitioning with that. That's a really good question.
Okay, we have another question. How does the internship work? Does the request for interns go to the vendor or ACC?
So that's a great question. The request for resumes would follow the same process as if you were ordering an ITSAC staff person of any level. So it goes to the vendors. You would just choose the job level to be an intern, and then there's an intern level 1, 2, or 3, which is dependent on how far along they have gotten in their program.
Okay. Next question, can we get a more detailed explanation of the statement of work? I understand it is not intended to replace DBITS, but what exactly would an agency put in a statement of work? Just the type of staffing needs the agency might require for that year?
So yes, typically that's what we would expect to see, is the type of staffing needs that you would expect for the year. And this was contemplated around things that you may have a long-term need for fluctuating staff. So a call center is a good example. If you're putting up a specialized call center for whatever reason and you need support for that call center, you could issue a statement of work saying that your agency has identified an ongoing need for an indeterminate number of staff for X period of time. Describe the qualifications of the staff that you're looking for. If there are any specialized skills or training that you need, and then you would receive it back you'd receive responses back, typically not resumes, but responses from the vendors on how they would solve your particular staffing needs. So it really is about you identifying staffing needs as a customer, describing to the vendors what those staffing needs may be, any details that you could give them regarding where you think peak times may be, and then allowing the vendors to respond back to you, not with resumes, but with a response that details how they are best positioned to meet your agency specific needs. If that wasn't clear, please submit a follow-up question. I want to make sure that we understand this point.
Okay, here is another question. Can our current contractors be extended on the current contract and then we rebid for FY 2022?
So likely yes, if your current contractor's PO has that ability to extend it that far. So it's really dependent on what your agency did when they issued that solicitation. Did it contemplate those extensions? Does your agency allow you to do those extensions? If you do extensions prior to 9/1, then your existing PO contract rates, terms, and conditions will remain in place. If there's an award that happens after 9/1, a new PO is issued, then those 9/1 and on awards would be under the new rate. And if there's a different nuance to that question, again, please resubmit, because I could read that in a different way and it would have a slightly different answer.
Okay. Feel free to enter any questions you might have at this time.
So,
Okay, it looks like we're getting some. Of course, all agencies have been tasked to reduce the budget. Has this been taken into consideration?
yes, so these rates, originally when they were issued, they were significantly lower. But these rates are much more in line with the market rates that are out there than the last set of ITSAC contracts were. And we have, in providing the ITSAC intern options, I think we have given you a vehicle for reducing your budget while still meeting your staff augmentation needs. So those intern rates are up to 15% below market. So you should be able to reduce your budget using the ITSAC.
Okay, we have another question. Under DBITS, if you receive multiple vendor options for fluctuating staff needs, you could potentially then choose between vendor options.
So under DBIT,
maybe I need.
Yes, you could. Under the ITSAC, you could as well. You could choose one vendor over another, or maybe you want to issue blanket purchase orders to multiple vendors and then assign or request staff from them. And one question Herschel asked me about this yesterday that I didn't work onto the slide is, once you've issued that blanket purchase order, if you have a need for that staff that blanket purchase order covers, all you would have to do at that point is call the vendor, because you've done the competition to identify the vendor who can meet the staffing needs. And then the vendor would do the hiring and get you that staff on site in relation to the SLAs that you set with them. So there would be no need to do a further ITSAC competition using the ITSAC portal. You could go straight to the vendor once they have been awarded your contract.
So best when requesting for staff, is it best to request several versus one when someone doesn't work out?
Requesting for staff, is it best to request several versus one? So it's very infrequent that a staff, an ITSAC staff, does not work for a particular agency. We don't see it very often. So unless you have the need for several, I would request just the one. But that is Colleen's personal opinion when using ITSAC, not DIR's personal or DIR's agency position. I strive to let the vendors know exactly what it is that I need, and I know that I have the option, should that staff not work out for whatever reason, to have the gratis period as defined in the standard terms and conditions.
Okay, another question here. Are there any examples of the statement of work?
So DIR has an example I can share. It is not a true statement of work. It is an email request solicitation that is similar to a statement of work. And I'm happy to share that, where it defines the business problem and it defines the objective, and it invites interested parties to respond.
Okay. And I will go ahead and just announce this one. Can we get a copy of this presentation? And the answer is yes. And it is all included in this webinar right now. If you go to handouts, you should be able to see a copy of this presentation. Another question, Colleen, is are there definitions to the title / classifications?
Yes, there are. They are included in the ITSAC solicitation documents, and I am happy to provide those to all attendees once this webinar has concluded.
Next question, will terms for ending a contractor under ITSAC change in terms of notice period?
No, there were no changes to that part of the terms and conditions.
Okay. Then the question, somebody joined late. Will this recording be available on the website?
So a link to the recording should be made available. I know that Tracy Romero, who's facilitating this, is recording and will make that available as soon as we get it closed captioned and cleaned up.
Okay, so looks like next question is, are the years for level 1, 1 to 3, level 2, 4 to 7, level 3, 8 or more?
So yes, there are years for the different levels. That's part of the definitions of those levels. And it is something that if you are a user of the ITSAC portal, you will be reminded of as you're entering your qualifications and skills into there for a request. But that is part of the document that I will be sending out to all attendees.
Okay, and I'm thinking this next question, I think I registered this. If you registered, if you're attending this webinar, we have your information, and that's from that list is where we will be providing the information.
And I do apologize. My cat is participating in this webinar perhaps more than he should be.
Okay, so I'll make sure we have your information. Question, will the portal allow for more than one user per agency?
So I believe that functionality is in the works. And Amy, if you're still on, you can talk about when we think that might happen.
Yes, Colleen, yes, it is in the works, if not already allowed. But yes, we recognize that there is a need for basically a super user and then other users as well. So a super user would be able to see all of the agency requests versus a regular user would only be able to see their own requests. So that is on our list for portal feature enhancements. And if we don't make it to the 9/1 day, it will be in a release soon after that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Your cat says no.
the cat and the bird have decided to start speaking to each other, so I keep muting myself in between so you don't have to hear the conversation.
Colleen, you see my note?
No.
I can read it.
I can address
Or
it.
go ahead, Amy.
So one of the other changes that we're looking at making in the portal is for duplicates or candidates where their years of experience did not meet the minimum years that you have entered as required. In the past, we have not allowed those resumes to be passed on to the customer to review. The current contract, especially on duplicates, says that the vendors who submit duplicates, they each have a chance to withdraw a candidate so the other one can go forward, or they're both basically disqualified. The new contracts don't have that language. One of the reasons we thought about that was if a duplicate is submitted and you really like that candidate, then maybe one vendor is going to offer a better price for that candidate, and you might want to go with the vendor that offers the lower price. So those resumes are going to be passed through in the new release of the portal. Also, if a resume does not meet your minimum requirements you've entered, we will indicate that it does not meet, but the resume is still going to be passed through. This is so that you as a customer can make a determination on best value. Do you have a trade-off where that candidate might not, you asked for 8 years of experience in programming of something and they only have 6, but they really know your business really well. You might trade off those 2 years of experience for the other experience that would make them a valuable candidate. And so we're allowing those resumes to pass through with the indication of was a duplicate submitted or the indication of it did not meet those minimum requirements. This allows you as a customer to make your own best value determination when reviewing those resumes. So that is a change that you will see coming forward.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So Tracy, if you want to go to the next slide. Again, you do have this in the slide deck that was provided as a handout, and we will make this available on the website. But we do have our contact information available for you here if you need to reach out to us. Obviously, we've included emails. That seems to work better right now than the phone systems. So if you need anything from us, just email us, and we are happy to assist you with any questions that you might have about the ITSAC contracts, any specific issues that you need addressed. We are here for you. And we will get out the job descriptions for you, and as well as the new ITSAC rates, just so that you have that package. Just understand that it is possible that the ITSAC rate may be adjusted somewhat during the evaluation and negotiation of the contract. If that happens, we will provide all of the attendees today with a follow-up email with those new rates in a couple of months. Thank you all for being here today.